American congressmen in the Soviet Union. Photography, Yevgeny Fedyaev and Ivan Filatov. Central Documentary Film Studios. A group of American congressmen arrived for a visit in the Soviet Union on invitation of the USSR Supreme Soviet. The group was headed by Speaker of the House, Karl Albert. They were met at the Leningrad airport by Chairman of the Council of Nationalities of the Supreme Soviet, Vitaly Rubin, and deputies to the National and the Russian Federation's parliaments. This was a return visit to that made to the United States by a Soviet parliamentary delegation headed by Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Commission of the Council of Nationalities of the Supreme Soviet, Boris Ponomaryov. The American guests visited the Leningrad City Soviet, where they were received by First Deputy Chairman Mikhail Filonov. The group included Speaker of the House Karl Albert, Congressman Robert Michael Melvin Price, Clemens Zablocki, Edward Boland, Phil Lendrum, John Bradamus, Delbert Latta, James Killen, Philip Burton, William Green, Sidney Yates, Tim Carter, Thomas Foley, Tom Bevel, Bill Archer, George Danielson, and Millicent Fenwick. The guests were told about Leningrad and its people, about the city's past, present, and future. This is the Smolny building, which served as headquarters of the 1917 revolution. This was headquarters for the leader of the revolution, Vladimir Lenin. It was here in this hall at the Second All-Russian Congress of Soviets that the first in history workers' and peasants' government was formed. This is the room where the chairman of the Council of People's Commissars, Vladimir Lenin, founder of the socialist state, lived and worked. Here in the Smolny, the decree on peace was proclaimed, becoming the cornerstone of the Soviet Union's peaceful foreign policy. During the years of the Second World War, the people of Leningrad, together with the multi-million Soviet people, defended their country from the fascist invaders. The guests laid wreaths at the Piskaryov Memorial Cemetery, honoring those who fell defending the city. Hundreds of thousands defended the city during the siege of Leningrad, and most of those who perished are buried here. The world will never forget the 900 days of the siege of Leningrad. The Nazis did their best to demolish the city, to starve the population. But the people withstood the ordeal and emerged victorious. Leningrad is the second largest Soviet city. It is a big industrial, scientific, and cultural center. Leningrad is famous for its architecture, thoroughfares, museums, and monuments. Events took place here that have changed the fate of mankind. Leningrad is also 2.5 centuries of Russian history and culture. The Hermitage, one of the world's famous art museums, with over 2.5 million creations relating to different ages, countries, and nations. The American guests were told that this previously exclusive collection of art had been turned into a people's museum accessible to all. The collection includes works by the unparalleled Italian masters of the Renaissance, different schools and trends, sculpture, and archaeological finds. The Peterhof Palace is a wonderful example of Russian architecture with exquisite buildings, beautiful parks, and fountains. The Nazis gutted the palace and parks, ruining practically everything when they were retreating. It seemed almost an impossible task to restore the palace to its original state. But the creative spirit of the Soviet people is great indeed. It is seen in the preservation of the old and the building of a new, great future. From Leningrad, the American guests left for Moscow. They were accompanied by the chairman of the Council of Nationalities of the Supreme Soviet, Vitaly Rubin, and other officials. In Moscow, the guests were met by Supreme Soviet deputies Georgy Zhukov, Genrikas Zimanas, Lydia Likova, Nikolai Maslinikov, Pyotr Pimenov, Lev Shapirov, and the American ambassador to Moscow, Walter John Stessel. The next day, the American congressmen were received by Chairman of the Council of Nationalities of the Supreme Soviet, Vitaly Rubin. They were told about the work and functioning of the Soviet Parliament, where important state economic, social, and cultural questions are decided on. Very important to the work of the Parliament are the various standing commissions. In the Grand Kremlin Palace, Soviet deputies to Parliament met with the American congressmen. The meeting was opened by Vitaly Rubin. The chairman of the Foreign Affairs Commission, Boris Ponomaryov, touched on a wide range of problems, including Soviet-American relations and international affairs. Boris Ponomaryov stressed that Soviet deputies to Parliament were happy to welcome guests from America, the first official delegation in the history of Soviet-American relations. A very big and positive role in the discussions of urgent problems of Soviet-American relations was played, he said, by the personal contacts of the leaders of the USSR and the United States. The head of the American group, Speaker Carl Albert, thanked the hosts for the reception accorded the American congressmen. "We came here as friends," he said, "guided by a desire for cooperation." People the world over are working to achieve a relaxation of tensions. The tragedies of the Second World War have not yet receded fully into the past. The tomb of the unknown soldier. The American guests honor the memory of those who gave their lives to save Europe and the world from the plague of fascism. The Soviet people lost 20 million in that war. Later, at a press conference, Speaker of the House Carl Albert was to say that the group started its visit in Leningrad, where they felt a growing admiration shared by all Americans for a people who fought together with them against the common enemy in the World War. Moscow today is one of the big cities of the world with a population of more than 7.5 million. Of this number, 4 million have received new apartments from the government free of charge. Moscow builds anew while preserving its history. The Armory in the Kremlin, a unique museum of Russian and foreign art. This is one of the country's oldest museums. This was once worn by czars. Carriages of past centuries. The guests attended a performance at the circus in one of Moscow's new residential areas. The congressman then left for the Crimea. The Crimea is famous for its citrus fruits and grapes, grains and vegetables. The livestock here is also of a very high quality. The Druzhba Narodov, or Friendship of Nations Cooperative Farm. The chairman described the work here and spoke of the problems and tasks facing the farmers. This farm has a varied economy. The vineyards, the fruit orchards, and the farm fields. And this is the building in Yalta where in February 1945 the three Allied countries met for the Crimean Conference to take decisions concerning the final defeat of fascist Germany and its post-war status. They also decided on some of the more important aspects of political and economic problems of liberated Europe. The American delegation was received by General Secretary Leonid Brezhnev, who was vacationing in Yalta at the time. Leonid Brezhnev was happy to greet the American guests. The meeting was also attended by alternate member of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union Politburo Boris Ponomaryov, chairman of the Council of Nationalities of the Supreme Soviet Vitaly Rubin, Supreme Soviet deputies Georgy Tsukhanov, Georgy Arbatov, Leonid Zamyatin, and the American ambassador Walter John Stessel. The talks touched on Soviet-American relations and international problems. Leonid Brezhnev spoke of the importance of the significant improvement in relations between the Soviet Union and the United States, apparent in recent years, that this was in the interests of Soviet and American people and helped to improve the international climate and to consolidate world peace. Attention was also focused on further improving relations between the two countries in view of the successes of the Helsinki Conference on European Security and Cooperation. The participants spoke of the broad opportunities for the further development of Soviet-American cooperation. Both sides said it was necessary to take effective steps to limit and to stop the arms race. There was mutual satisfaction over the success of the Soyuz-Apollo joint experiment. Both sides stressed that it was important and helpful to continue regular contacts between the USSR Supreme Soviet and the American Congress.
Well, it was a splendid meeting. I think we spent something like 2.5 hours with the General Secretary. We discussed a wide range of subjects of common interest between our two countries and many others that are of interest to the entire world. The General Secretary was very gracious. He was very patient. He answered at length every question that was put to him by members of our delegation. He expressed his interest in various things that have been happening in recent months and what he hopes to have happen in the near future.
At the conclusion of the visit, the American delegation was seen off at the Simferopol airport by Chairman of the Council of Nationalities of the USSR Supreme Soviet, Vitaly Rubin, First Secretary of the Crimean Regional Communist Party Committee of the Ukraine, Nikolai Kirichenko, Supreme Soviet deputies Georgy Arbatov, Leonid Zamyatin, and others. Ambassador Walter John Stessel was also at the airport. The meetings and talks the guests had during their visit showed that contacts between the Supreme Soviet and the American Congress were an important means of achieving an understanding between the two countries. Although there are certain difficulties, the relaxation taking place between the Soviet Union and the United States and in the world in general continues to expand, and this process is aided by contacts between parliamentarians of countries having differing social systems. Bon voyage until we meet again.
Well defined. This is a metavolcanic. It's like a tooth unit in here, and I think this.
When we get back to the lab, we can do some contrast stretches and also some minute analysis to see foliation directions.
Digital analysis. A request to the computer. A Landsat mosaic, a single image, or a subscene. Any of the 4 spectral bands to highlight individual features for more precise. For example, a quantitative assessment of spectroradiometric properties in the data.
Sensed data analysis offers several things that cannot. Basically, digital analysis is left for a refinement of a manual analysis. Once the overall and general relationships are established in manual analysis, the remotely sensed data and work it digitally.
An electronic site of the Homestake gold mine. The image is now digitally with more precision, with greater accuracy, enhanced and closer views, spectral bands to confirm what has been inferred from the basic imagery.
This is the open pit right down in here. We'll see it better.
To spectral band. 4 and 5.
Very nice, interesting. There are some strong fault elements.
And then band 6.
There's band 7.
The infrared band 7. Clear image of the landforms. Contrast enhancement provided the image and shows it to us in better detail. Digital analysis, the goal of finding another region in the Black Hills where the geology is similar to the Homestake mine area.
Enhancement techniques were trying to make a better image of that data. Contrast enhancement is used to bring out in the data that are not well expressed on standard images. A lot of these topographic features are showing up. Especially this dark zone right here. Limonite, open cut on the Precambrian iron formation.
To classify or group digital data on the basis of different cover types and conditions.
Classification is where you are evaluating brightness values to combine them into spectral classes.
In the classified image, other cover types are separately emphasized for easier interpretation. Density slicing, another classification technique, displayed in varying degrees of brightness.
This area here is pretty much Paleozoic sequence.
Okay.
It's probably about 100 feet down to the Precambrian. It might summarize
The fall of a river in a canyon in Precambrian times were deposited in regions. In a later age, those minerals, copper, tungsten, were concentrated together with deposits of gold and silver. The data analyzed and interpreted suggests that it is here, in this area, will be found.
this is the Homestake mine. All of the towards that.
Some further field study, perhaps some geochemical samples. Few bits of data fall into place, completing the exploration model with which
The iron formation associated with some felsic volcanic rocks.
final choice is made of the most likely site where mineral deposits may be found. And drilling operations can begin.
I think so.
Stream here, perhaps that stream there. The stream right there.
Successful minerals exploration accomplished in large part using remote